Are you struggling for consistency in your sim racing? Does your iRating look like a roller coaster? If so, we have good news for you. The way to get more consistent is to first understand what you're doing differently than the professionals. And VRS is the answer. With our competitive subscription, you will have the telemetry, setups, tutorials, and everything else you need to fully analyze your driving. Our data packs and the ability to compare your driving with the best in the world will show you exactly where to adjust your inputs, change your driving line, and shave seconds off of your lap times. And our powerful and precise Direct Force Pro wheelbase and precision pedals are being used by some of the world's best drivers. All these champions agree that VRS hardware is not just the best on the market, it's also priced well below the competition. So if you're looking to upgrade to direct drive and the best pedals in sim racing, VRS is your answer. If you want to get better, get faster, and make it happen sooner rather than later, you owe it to yourself to find out why so many people are switching to VRS. You'll be so glad that you did. Visit www.virtualracingschool.com and learn why the best use VRS.
Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to Super Sunday here on Apex Racing TV and the Weekend Warriors series, where next up we've got the Spec Racer Fords. My name is Ron Mullins. Alongside me in the commentary booth is Charles Bichelle, and in the virtual production hall we have our old friend Samuli Kumo. Today we're in upstate New York at the ever-historic Watkins Glen, where for the last time this season the drivers of the Spec Racer Ford Weekend Warriors series will do battle. We're on the simplified NASCAR Cup layout used by NASCAR every single year, and Charles, we've been talking about this race and what it could entail ever since the Formula Ford race earlier on this afternoon. Now, there's a lot of things we're expecting to see out of this race. What's some of the stuff that you're keeping in mind, Charles?
I mean, basically it's the draft first and foremost. These cars draft so well. This track is just, I mean, it's well known to all the racers because it's so widely used in so many different series. So it's I guess a driver's favorite for most part. So it's going to be one of those where you're going to see lots of drafts for passes on the front stretch and then the back stretch going into the bus stop / inner loop, depending on your terminology. And then, yeah, no boot today, so we've got the short layout, so we'll make that turn around the outer loop, down the little NASCAR chute and into the final two corners of the track for a very short lap. But it's going to be, you know, these cars are going to be well planted, and they're going to be jockeying for position from the drop of the green flag to the checkers. So it's going to be a fun race, and I'm looking forward to it.
I've described many a Spec Racer Ford race, whether it be here with the Spec Racer Ford Weekend Warriors series or with the Ray Esports Racing League every single Tuesday. I've described many Spec Racer Ford races as being glorified 100-mile-an-hour games of leapfrog. That is going to be put on full display here today. We were talking with our producer, Samuli, before we started up the show, and he brought up a very good point. How there's only really 2.5 heavy braking zones here at this track, this being one of them, heading through the bus stop, and you can see these drivers slamming into the curb here in this qualifying session. You can also see that draft being put on full display as well. Usually in racing, you expect these drivers to have a bit of their own real estate. They want to have their own small little slice of freedom from the rest of the field. Here, it's entirely different. The draft is so huge in this qualifying session. It can make a hell of a difference in the race and this qualifying session as well. So we're seeing this hornet's nest of Spec Racer Ford race cars navigate around this track. That's Tom Gradwell in the 909 car, the Masters driver, currently currently P11 in this qualifying session. And I think that we just saw a Masters driver. We should probably talk about the points, because this, of course, is the last round of the season. We're going to have 3 champions decided, and I'll tell you what, we've got some intense championship fights. S1 is the most separated of the 3 categories we have. Joao Tabino, the Brazilian, even after a frankly dreadful meeting 1 week ago at Winton, he's still leading 30 points over Marco Pinheiro in P number 2, Jason Green in 3rd. He could be a factor in this race, and we'll get into that in a few moments' time. Evandro Dantas in 4th, Dudu Castro in 5th, Simon Mayer in P number 6 in the number 5 car. We'll see if the driver of the 5 can slide his way up into P number 5 between now and the end of this, with only 21 points separating himself and Castro in P6 and P5 respectively. Then we have Christian Gabanka, Andre Favini, Bobby West, and Alice Pleva will round out your top 10 in the Spec 1 category. And then moving over to Spec 2, it's intense at the front of Spec 2. You've got Philip Berry, the Australian, in the 888 car, leading those championship standings, and then only 10 points behind, you've got Pedro Carvalho, who finished a brilliant 4th last time out at Winton. Those two are leagues ahead of Paul Jackson in P3, Wilson Brasarosco in P4, and Michelle Vlaglini rounding out your top 5 in the Spec 2 category. That is going to be intense in the Spec 2 class, but compared to the Masters, it is a vast yawning chasm separating Philip Berry and Carvalho, because the Masters are nuts.
Yeah, Tom Gradwell is still leading the Masters, 512 points. Jeff Fritcher, 5 points behind in P2, so obviously that is still in play for that championship. Brad Cathcart in 3rd, and he's only 9 points back of P2. So Kurt Nunez in 4th, Jorg Monty in 5th. Kurt still got a chance to maybe sneak in there to get a podium. I think that's about it, but those top 3 cars separated by basically 14 points. So it's going to be, the battle is going to be, during this race to see who's going to get that championship.
12 races, well, 11. We haven't ran the 12th yet, but 11 races, and you only have 5 points separating the front 2 drivers in the Masters category. That's absolutely insane. Jeff Fritcher in P2 is off the back of a win at Winton last time, and this man, Tom Gradwell, is currently P4 of the Masters drivers. You see the likes of Murakami, Mani, and Reese, who are usually some of the fastest. However, Murakami, Mani, and Reese have had fairly up and down seasons. We're not going to mention the specific word that starts with L when it comes to Jorg Monty. He's had an up and down season. Oh my god, perfect time to cut to him as they see him tumbling at the top of the S's. Hopefully his race doesn't go in a very similar fashion to that. That would not be ideal, and I think we'd maybe have to read out some sort of tribute after that. But anyways, moving on from those aerial acrobatics during this qualifying session, it's looking pretty good for this man, Marco Pinheiro, in the number 16 car. He's currently on our provisional pole, but the gap between himself and Joao Tabino in P1 and P2, less than a half a tenth of a second. It is there is no margin all throughout this entire field. The top 24 covered by less than a second, Charles. I think this has to be one of the closest Spec Racer Ford qualifying sessions maybe ever.
Yeah, I think you're right. And this seems to be the MO of the Spec Racer is you're going to get these really, really tight qualifying packs. And then the race is going to be very much the same thing. Like I said, this is a very well-known track. Drivers are just quite comfortable with it. We race here pretty much every season in these cars. So yeah, it doesn't surprise me. And what we saw with Antonio Race and Jorg Monty in the qualifying session, let's hope that we got that out of the way, because that turn 2, the S's here, especially on lap 1, could be an incident where we could take out a lot of cars during the race.
Lap 1 is going to be absolutely crazy. We saw in the Ray Esports Racing League this past Tuesday, running on the layout of Watkins Glen with the boot, the chaos that divulged heading through the bus stop at the very beginning of that race. I think it was about a 3 or 4 car crash that we saw at the very beginning of that. There's many corners that'll catch these drivers out, but I think when it comes to chaos on lap 1, turn 1 is going to be insane. It's just inviting enough whereby you can try and be like, hey, I want to take a bit more speed heading through here, but it's also punishing enough whereby if you make a teeny tiny little mistake, you're either going to pick up a slowdown that's going to drop you like a rock through the field, or you're going to be in a world of hurt against one of the barriers lining this racetrack. John Vogel has shot his way up into P7 in this qualifying session. That was an almighty lap with a heck of a tow. He has shot his way up the running order as the highest qualified Spec 2 driver. Currently, our old buddy Josh Wilkie is in 18th, so that's a pretty decent gap between those two, at least when it comes to track position. Lap time-wise, that was only 0.4 of a second, which again shows you the intense closeness throughout this entire Spec Racer Ford field. But now we're coming to the end of this qualifying session, Charles. Less than 2 minutes to go. This is, I gotta imagine the order that we have at the top 25 right now is probably going to be entirely different once these drivers start to set in their cookers.
Yeah, I think there'll be quite a few changes here in the last couple of laps before we get this all said and done. And so the one thing that we're not seeing here that we'll see during the race is bump drafting, because obviously bump drafting will negate your qualifying lap because it's contact, which will negate your lap. So they don't do it here, but you can rest assured that there'll be lots and lots of bump drafting during the race.
So we actually have a insider in this race, that being our buddy and colleague here on Apex Racing TV, Josh Wilkie. And I'm not his physician, so I don't violate any Hippocratic laws by saying this. He pinched a nerve in his hip earlier on today, and he is brave enough to hop into the sim, and he tells us he has a bag of ice right by his hip, and it's helping him along. Hopefully it's helping him along quite well in this qualifying session. He's still in P19, which is a very good result, second of the drivers in Spec 2 currently. Chris Murakami is top of the Masters in P9, and still at the north end of the field is Marco Panera at a 120.761, and the top three drivers in this session are in the pits, so we're not going to see any sort of improvements between those drivers, along with Rodriguez and Mayer. They're in the pits as well, so we'll see what Andre Favini or Christian Kabanka can do. Kabanka jumps up to P6. That was a very good result from him. That's a very good lap time, as he's going to park on the outskirts of turn number 1. Kabanka, he won earlier this afternoon in the Formula Ford Weekend Warriors. We'll see what he can do, possibly starting this race in 6th. We'll see if anyone can jump up the running order. Brad Cathcart, let's see what he can do. Had a big tow from Jorg Monty right in front of him, and he shoots up way up to P7. So nicely played from the Australian driver with the checkered flag now out in this qualifying session. We're starting to see that slipstream benefit these drivers a whole lot.
Yeah, absolutely. You see the second or third car in line is just getting is picking up a couple of tenths on every lap, and that's just kind of the way that you have to do things, especially with the Spec Racer car. Is you have to be able to work with the field and try and get yourself in position to get that slipstream. It's going to give you a half a second or more each lap by using it, and it's just one of those games that you have to play in qualifying.
And so we're towards the end of this qualifying session, waiting for some more drivers to cross the finish line and round out this qualifying session. And I think before we get into the meat and potatoes of this race meeting, the race itself, I think we should probably talk about the fantastic sponsor that we've had here for the Spec Racer Fords. They joined us midway through this season. They've also been a proud partner of the Spec Racer Fords over in the Ray Esports series as well. That being Personal Wealth Solutions. Just like in racing, financial planning and investments require a team behind and experience as well. Personal Wealth Solutions creates custom investment and financial planning strategies for select individuals and businesses as well. With over 25 years of experience, their goal is not to have you feel like a number, but make you feel like they're number one. If you'd like to learn more about financial planning run by racers serving racers, head on over to www.personalwealthsolutions.com. We would like to thank Personal Wealth Solutions for being the proud sponsor of the Spec Racer Fords. And I think if we were running a Spec Racer Ford race at this track in real life, on this layout specifically, a lot of these drivers would probably need to use Personal Wealth Solutions just to afford to repair the race cars, because I feel like, these drivers very clean, very respectful, but they all race each other extremely hard. I think this race is going to be quite hectic. What do you think, Charles?
Absolutely. We got to get through the first half of the first lap. Turn 1, the S is the bus stop. Once we get through there, I think the cars kind of string themselves out and run single file. But the first half of that lap is, kind of jockeying for position. And as you said, the turn four wide into turn 1, and you can't go 4 wide out of turn 1. So that'll be the first place we'll start looking.
Well, we're now at the calm before the storm. We're taking a look at the starting grid. Marco Pinero, the Italian, is going to be leading them to green in the number 16 car. Joining him on the front row is going to be Joao Tabino, only 0.04 of a second, separating those two after 20 minutes of qualifying. Bobby West, the Brit, is going to be starting in P3 due to Castro. A nice qualifying time from him. He is going to be in 4th. Jesus Rodriguez in 5th. Christian Gabanka in P number 6. Simon Mayer will start this race in 7th. John Vogel, with that absolutely awesome qualifying performance to jump his way up the running order, is going to be starting this race in 8th. And we have Jason Green in 9th, and Chris Murakami will round out your top 10.
Yeah, in P11 is Andrea Favini, Jorg Monti in P12. Going on down, we got Antonio Race in 13th, Megan Overstreet 14th, Tom Gradwell in 15th, Trenton Kramer in 16th, Brad Cathcart in P17, alongside Curtin Nunez in 18th, Claudio Gardini in 19th, and Josh Wilkie in P20. Further on down, Pedro Carvalho 21st, Wilson Bruzarosco 22nd, Philip Berry 23rd, Stevie Ray, league organizer, in 24th, Jeff Fritcher in 25th, Scott Russell in 26th, Andrew Love in 27th, Jim Brewster 28th, Kenneth Batley in 29th, Russ Telker in 30th, Paolo Brim in 31st, Gianni Longan 32nd, 33rd is Wayne Buttermore, Bob Kern in 34th, and Michelle Viglini rounds out your 35-car grid.
So that is the final starting grid from this season. 12 rounds, and I may try and do the math in my head real quick, aka just pulling out the calculator app on my phone. If we averaged about 30 cars every single race this season, which I may think is a little bit of a conservative estimate, we probably had closer to about 35 cars on average. But nevertheless, 30 cars for 12 races, that is 360 starting positions we've had to go through so far this season. Charles, I think we may need to claim some kind of compensation just going through the starting grid. And I see 2 drivers in the pits. I think Joao Tabino, maybe one of them.
Yeah,
Ooh, that is a big story.
Yeah, I'm wondering, both of those, they jumped back just before the start of the race. I'm wondering if that means that maybe they didn't reset their fuel. They still had their quality set on and had just caught it at the last minute. And had to pit, or if this is some kind of strategy that they've got involved here that they're going to try and play out during the course of this race. But obviously, you know, sitting in the back there and pit starting this race is going to be it's going to be very difficult to find your way back up to the front.
Yeah, that is going to put them on the back foot massively. I'm curious what they're cooking, whether they're cooking with gas or they should never be let in a kitchen again. I will say turn 1 at this track, I mean, we mentioned it earlier on in this broadcast during that qualifying session. Turn 1 on lap 1 is probably going to be a source of a lot of chaos. I'm already bracing my vocal cords for what kind of drama we may have there. So really, at a track like this, maybe starting from the pits won't be the worst idea in the world. You're certainly going to be avoiding all the chaos of lap 1. And hey, considering how dramatic we expect this race to be, that may be a good strategy from them after all. We'll see what they can do reclaiming their way through the grid. I'm curious, maybe the reason why they didn't take the starting grid is possibly because they forgot to fuel their car up for the race. We've seen that before. And we actually saw that from the Ray Esports series a couple of weeks ago. Well, let's say a couple of weeks ago. This past Tuesday at this very track, during that Spec Racer Ford race, I think it was Miles Crabb that thanked one of the drivers for not joining the starting grid. I think it may have been Trenton Kramer joined the starting grid a little bit late, and it allowed Miles Crabb, who went on to win that race, to actually fill up his car with a bit more fuel. He had his qualifying fuel settings on it, and that would not be ideal for the drivers in that race or this one as well. We have a pit stop to contend with, 40 minutes of racing action in front of us. It has been a hard-fought, dramatic, and intense season here from the Ray Esports Spec Racer Ford Weekend Warriors runoff, stressing that 5 times fast. And we have one more race to go before we wrap this season off. That Porsche pace car has made that turn down pit lane. That's a very disorganized start. Bobby West already trying to make it 3 wide. He may pick up a penalty for that, but the lights are out, the green flag is out, and the drivers are on their way. It's a terrible start for West, a good start for Pinero. He's going to be leading comfortably heading into turn number 1 as Cabanca is now trying to get a move done to move into P number 2. Meanwhile, the driver's going 3 wide, a little bit farther in the back. I'll be very, very surprised if they all negotiate turn 1 and lap 1 as a whole clean. And we have the drivers negotiating the S's for the first time. Pinero is still leading, West in P2 and Cabanca in P3. And the game of leapfrog starts right about now. We're following Trent Ryan Kramer running just outside the top 10, giving a bump draft to Megan Overstreet as it go down the back straightaway. A lot of shuffling a little bit farther up the road. Chris Murakami, Rodriguez, and Vogel swapping places, and nearly a little bit of contact between Murakami and Kabank as they go through the inner loop for the first time behind a driver spinning off a little bit farther in the back. I'm not sure who that was. That was mega sideways heading through there. That was Pedro Carbolo, and going for another spin. Hopefully he doesn't get T-boned by anyone. No, he negotiates that clean. And meanwhile, the charge up towards the front of the field has now started for the driver that started down in the pits, and we got some side-by-side action heading into turn at number 6. Who's going to be back out in this fight? Jesus Rodriguez on the inside line, and we've got Murakami on that outside, and Jesus Rodriguez gets that job done to move into P number 4. And Jason Green is also very slow. I'm curious if he may have picked up a slowdown, but either way, Charles, surprisingly clean on lap number 1 as they're going 3 wide down the start-finish straightaway to start lap number 2. With there only being a simple spin heading through the bus stop, I am honestly shocked that they negotiate lap 1 clean.
Yeah, that was a really good start by everybody. They kept themselves in line. I thought it was kind of interesting. Panero just kind of held the field up, and I think Wes was expecting it. He wanted to jump as soon as the pace car was off, and Panero said, no, not yet. And so I don't think Wes passed him, so I think he's okay. I don't think he's going to be black flagged. But yeah, otherwise a really good start by the entire field. And so now we've got, another 38 minutes of racing, and it's going to be tough work for Tabino and Castro to work their way through the field.
And we're seeing the hard fighting continue just towards the tail end of the drivers running in the top 20. This is Tom Gradwell running right behind Kurt Nunez in P15 with series admin Stevie Ray right behind him in P17. This is the start of a train between from P15 all the way down back. You can see the field is still incredibly close at this stage of the race and going side by side into turn number 6. And you can see a little bit of damage on the front end of Gradwell's race car. So I'm curious if it was a little bit of bump drafting going wrong, and that's a big thing with this race. The bump drafting going to be critical. You need to do it at some point, but with these race cars, there's it's a mailbox slot for the radiators in these race cars. If these drivers bump draft a little bit too aggressively and a little bit too hard, they may damage that radiator opening, and they may start suffering from overheating issues. That could be a factor in this race as well.
Yeah, you really have to watch out for that. Just tucking the car in and bump drafting is it doesn't do a lot for your air intake. So you've seen it with NASCAR. They have to kind of let the nose out just a little bit and get some cooler air in there, and not basically just breathe in the exhaust of the car in front. As we see Kabeka to the inside there, you're going to see quite a few of those passes during the course of the race as Murakami falls back into P4. West up in the front, and Kabeka in second, Panero third.
That was a beautiful camera shot we had heading through the bus stop, and we're going to get another one going down this back straightaway. Holy crap, look at that pack. It is from P1 Bobby West all the way back to Antonio Reese in P14. It's only about 3 seconds separating that massive pack, and you only have about a second and a half break between this pack in the top 14 and the other pack, which is massive right behind. It's kind of the racing that we were expecting, Charles. Just huge packs and huge trains forming of Spec Racer Ford race cars. It's probably going to be like this between the start, between now 4 minutes into this race all the way up until the finish. And once we hit that 40-minute mark, man, this is going to be intense. Hopefully the viewers here on Apex Racing TV are on the edge of their seats, because this is going to be intense. It's intense battling all throughout the field. Running outside the top 10 is our buddy Josh Wilkie running in P13, and he may be eyeing up a move on Jason Green in the not too distant future. And we mentioned a little bit earlier, this may have been confusing about what we talked about before the start of the race and before the start of the broadcast, but Jason Green, he usually does a little bit of fuel saving, actually getting a little bit of a bump draft from our buddy Josh Wilkie as they go down the back straightaway into the interloop. You can use the interloop and bus stop terminology interchangeably, and that's a big stack up heading into the turn, and that's a big hit for Kurt Nunez. He gets a double whammy heading through the interloop. Jim Brewster involved as well. A whole lot of cars caught up in that stack up heading into the interloop. We were expecting it at some point, and oh no, this may have been the worst commentator jinx of my life. We see our buddy Josh Wilkie around on the exit of the corner and some damage on the front end of that Spec Racer Ford race car. I think we have a lot of replays to look at to try and unpack this.
Yeah, for sure. As we see here, they're coming through, and looks like, just a little tap from Antonio Reese, the back of Josh Wilkie there. I think he was kind of held up with the car in front. And then further in the back there, you saw Kurt Nunez and several other cars. Jim Brewster, I think, kind of came up on it. Not really sure he was directly involved. We'll get another replay here as we see him spread out 3 wide and just, Kurt Nunez. And I can't see who that other car was. The black car there just looked like maybe he was going to try and juke to the outside, and there was just nowhere for him to go. And then that started the chain reaction.
I noticed one driver that cut through the middle of that. That was Tabino, and we'll touch on that a little bit. Look at this, 4 wide nearly going into the inner loop. Yamani is leading it now, coming through this corner, and Cabanca is in P number 2. Panero running in 3rd, Rodriguez in 4th, and Bobby West rounding out your top 5. But again, with how topsy-turvy this race has been thus far, that order is going to be completely different. Probably by the time they come back to the inner loop in a lap time, but Philip Berry with some rally action, thankfully for himself. He doesn't get hit by anyone. However, you can see Andrew Love running wide and running off the course entirely. A little bit of rally action for Andrew Love. He is not going to appreciate that a whole lot. He's going to drop down the running order to P26. Oh man, we were expecting the drama towards the beginning of this race, but now as we're over 5 minutes in, we're starting to see it heat up quite a lot. 3 wide heading into turn number 6. The words are basically escaping me. Joao Tabino, who started this race in the pits, has made his way up to P20. This is a flying start for the Brazilian.
Yeah, he's doing a great job just navigating the chaos back there. And as we can see, there's the 73, and that is Dudu Castro's working his way up. Not quite as quickly as Tabino, but is still working his way up. He's now up into P22. So they're working their way through. Obviously, I was going to mention that this is kind of how the gaps form in this race, is when people make mistakes. As you can see, that front group of about 13 cars is still pretty much together. They're still fighting for position every time there's a place that they can get a good draft. As you can see, Cabanca moving back out to the front, and Monty in 2nd, Panero in 3rd, and this is just going to be par for the course for the next 33 minutes or 32 minutes. As long as these cars don't get off track, don't get involved in an incident, they'll manage to just keep this group together and keep racing this hard for the rest of the race.
This is absolutely insane, and it's going to continue to be absolutely insane between now and the end of this. Jason Green running in P13. In most races, you'd expect the driver running in 13th to be over 10 seconds back. He's only 2 seconds off the leader, Christian Cabanca, and before they go onto this back straightaway, the order right now in the top 13 is going to get shuffled around entirely, but it is nuts. All across this field, we've got trains forming all throughout. I will say that train behind the P13 runner of Jason Green has kind of derailed a little bit. That chaos heading through heading into the inner loop has kind of broken it up, but up at the front, there's only one way you can describe it, with some bump drafting between Overstreet and Bobby West. All aboard the Cabanca train. Actually, now it's the Monty train as they're going side by side down the back straightaway. 3 wide nearly. Panero looking to risk it for the biscuit. Heading into the corner, there's going to be very close between Monty and Cabanca, with some drivers shuffling around a little bit farther in the back. Murakami and Rodriguez swapping spots as well. And you can see Overstreet and Rodriguez now battling quite hard. But Monty and Cabanca trading blows up at the front. They're going side by side around turn number 5 of the outer loop. That's a bit of a bold strategy. And it's actually going to help them out. It's not going to help them at all. It's going to help Panero out, as he's going to make it 3 wide heading down this back straightaway into turn number 6. He's going to be on that outside line, which is a bold move if he can make it stick. He backstabbing with Monty. However, he's still side by side. A little bit of contact made between Vogel and Panero as it goes through turn number 6. This is absolute insanity at the north end of the Spec Racer Ford field. Most of these cars have been going side by side pretty much this entire lap. Overstreet has been shuffling around all sorts of positions. Herself and Rodriguez have been battling hard, and now Rodriguez and Panero banging wheels heading into turn number 10. This is crazy.
Yeah, it is crazy, and this is just the nature of Watkins Glen and these cars running there. These cars will just swap positions and battle, and they'll battle through corners, and that just, all the battling that happens just keeps these cars together for longer and longer during the race. And so you've got a 13-car train up front. The group in back, Fritcher, Gardini, Bradwell, Ray, is a group of 4. They're actually making up a little bit of time to this group just because of the side-by-side battling in front. And so they're just you have to just keep your eyes open. Your eyes are basically stalks at this point. just watching the action and trying to keep your head on a swivel and keeping up with everybody as we see Reese on the inside there.
This is just absolutely crazy. We're seeing Reese and Kramer go side by side heading into turn number 6. Man, it is nuts. You know, this race is crazy. When I had to break out the harmonica to describe the craziness we've seen thus far, and I see a little bit of damage on the front end of Antonio Reese's race car, so I think maybe that contact between himself and Josh Wilkie a little bit earlier on, that could possibly slow him down going down the other straightaways here, which is, it's just huge. The straight line speed is incredibly vital when it comes to these races. It goes back to the point of that front end damage you could possibly pick up from some aggressive bump drafting. You don't want to do that. I've driven in these Spec Racer Ford races, well, not the Weekend Warriors, but I have driven in the official Spec Racer Fords, and at a track where straight line speed is incredibly important, any sort of aberration at the front end of your race car can slow you down like you're dragging a parachute. So these drivers are going to try and look to avoid that between now and the end of this. Kabanka, Murakami, Vogel, and Pinero are battling incredibly hard heading into the inner loop at the start of this lap. Monty, who's running up at the north end of the field, briefly took the lead not very long ago. He's now been shuffled down to P number 5. Currently the top 5 separated by only less than a second, and we're about 12 minutes into this race, and it's still incredibly tense, and some beating and banging and roughing each other up heading through the inner loop. Jim Brewster breaking his elbows out and going side by side with as many people as he possibly can. We've seen 3 wide action, we've seen 4 wide action. Charles, what do you think are the chances that we see some 5 wide action as Andrew Love takes that other wide line heading through the outer loop again?
I think if they can make it work without killing each other, then I think they will. As we see, looks like at least 2 cars. That's Overstreet and Vogel coming into the pits. They're saying, you know what, I think I want out of this for the time being. So let me come in here and get my pit stop done. So their hope is to hook onto the back of a group of cars and kind of just draft their way up and pick up a few spots. Maybe an undercut strategy is going to try and play out here, so we'll see if this all works out. Overstreet, Vogel, Gradwell, Barry Cathcart, and looks like Viglini in as well, and I think he's on his way out.
And we saw from those drivers coming down pit road trying to break out of this train of cars at the north end of the field how sketchy it was getting into the pits, and we're going to touch on that in a little bit. After this cools off, Kabanka, Murakami, Monty, and Pinero still covered by barely any air at the start of lap number 10. This is the polar opposite of what we saw in the Formula Ford Weekend Warriors earlier on today. They were setting 2-minute 40 lap times and qualifying in the race as well, and we only had like 14 left until they ended up taking the checkered flag. Here it's a polar opposite. These drivers doing 1-minute 20 lap times. They're beating each other up and racing as hard as they possibly can. We're coming to the end of the season. We have less than 30 minutes left to go for the final race of the season before the runoffs under the lights at Daytona in 1 week's time. So these drivers, they're feeling incredibly racy. They're feeling almightily aggressive, and they're seeing the red mist as well. I'm curious if any of these drivers are actually starting to get a little bit frustrated with their competitors. We may see tempers flare as well.
Yeah, I think that is definitely a possibility. I'd like these drivers run really hard, but they're clean. As we see Stevie Ray coming into the pits now, they run really clean. They race hard, but they're fair drivers, and we've seen them beat and bang on each other before. Sometimes tempers get a little worked up, but I think they're all aware this is kind of how this race goes. So a little more grace is given here because this is kind of, as we see it, 16. That's Pinero and Murakami. I say that a little more grace is given. We see a battle going into the bus stop.
How the hell do they keep it out of the barrier? Chris Murakami, he is getting away from that incident with a clean race car, definitely not with clean pants. And here's a replay. 3 wide into turn number 5 is not going to work if you're these drivers. We're running on board with Chris Murakami. He was the one, and I was actually running a little bit farther towards the left was Pinero. He was trying to get lined up heading in to the bus stop, and just sadly for him, he completely misjudged that and gave a door-banging hit to Chris Murakami. Oh my God, I nearly had a heart attack looking at that. Bobby West has come into the pits. He wants no part of the madness at the north end of the field. We're 15 minutes in, and we've seen probably about 1,000 overtakes so far. It's definitely a crazy number like that with a beautiful drift for Antonio Reese running in P5. Oh man, we're seeing these drivers start to break into the pits, which is a little bit shocking. I'm kind of surprised that the front end and that 13-car train that we had throughout this race and in the early stages, I'm surprised they didn't all come into the pits at the same time. But again, these drivers trying to do something different, and you can see Pinero, Kabenka, and Monty 3-1 going down the back straightaway. Hopefully for these driver stakes, they get away with it cleaner than what happened last lap. It's going to be Pinero on the inside, Kabenka sweeping around the outside, holding off the challenge to remain in P1. Meanwhile, we've got Reese and Kramer battling hard, heading in right behind. And with these drivers battling hard, you can see the likes of Favini, Murakami, Mayer, Green, and Gardini in that pack right behind. They're closing in as well. So this is going to get even more crazy than it already is. And here's Bobby West, who just came out of the pits in front of Megan Overstreet. So a little bit of an overcut working for Bobby West to remain in front of her, running in P22 currently. So we'll see if the drivers up towards the north end of the field try and respond to these early pitters. It's a bold call to stop so early on into this race, especially considering they don't really have any sort of slipstream help way farther back in the field. But hey, with how hard they've been battling, I am shocked that we haven't seen a multi-car pileup yet. Keyword being yet.
Yeah, I think that is the correct keyword. And yeah, I guess we're lucky they haven't done what they've done at Daytona and put tire barriers in the runoff area going into the inner loop. Or that would have been a lot worse for Mr. Murakami. So luckily you've got the runoff area. You can just kind of drive straight through it, take your slow down. But as you can see, he's still kind of in that second group. We're just kind of hanging on the end of this lead pack. And for West and Overstreet, they're going to have to work together. As we see Race just caught that curb quite wrong. Had to catch the car. Kramer with a great job. Oh no!
And there goes Antonio Reese.
Yeah.
Antonio Reese is around.
Yeah, was already kind of upset the car by catching the curbs as we get a replay here from Samuli. This is Tabino and Castro working their way back up through the field. As you can see, Kramer going wide, and it looks like he's just checked up a little bit and a little bit, maybe some netcode contact with Mayer, I think. So it didn't look like they actually made contact. That might have been a little bit of netcode working.
And maybe a little bit of netcode, maybe just a loss of grip. Reese again sliding it, heading around the final corner. And he also had that drift coming out of turn number 1. My voice is already giving out considering how dramatic this race has been thus far. Chris Murakami right now running in P7 as we just saw Antonio Reese pull into the pits along with Russell. So we see some drivers already coming down pit lane. Oh man, we haven't even hit the halfway mark of this race, and we've already seen some split strategies, and we haven't really talked about the pit stops yet. That pit entry is very sketchy, especially if you're running in one of these massive trains all around this racetrack. It's sketchy trying to come into the pits. It's also sketchy coming out of the pits. And we'll see what kind of strategies each drivers try and implement. Fuel saving as well could be big. We see Jason Green in the midst of that as well as Antonio Reese is exiting the pits in P21. We'll see, does he come out of the pits in front of some of the drivers that came in early? I don't believe so. Megan Overstreet, who's actually gotten back past Bobby West. They're running a little bit farther up the road as it's going to be side by side between Stevie Ray and Antonio Reese coming through the S's with Gradwell involved in that as well. Oh man, I am starting to run out of things to say with how dramatic this race has been. Gradwell and Ray going side by side down the back straightaway. It's going to be about last late breakers into the bus stop. It's going to be Gradwell pulling ahead well before they even think about getting on the brakes into the corner. And yeah, getting back to what I was going to say, Charles, I am running out of breath. Thankfully, running out of things to say, and running out of mental capacity to try and compartmentalize all the stuff that we've seen so far in this race. Man, I'm starting to run out of stuff to say, even though this race has been absolutely intense.
No, I completely understand. And it's one of those races where it's overtake after overtake. And as you said, the game will leapfrog at 125 miles an hour. I will say I think West and Overstreet are doing a good job of some tandem racing, just working together and using themselves, slipstreaming off each other, doing the leapfrog when they have to, and they've able to jump Reese by 13 seconds. So some of that was his spin, and some of it was just they're just doing a good job of just running really good laps. And as we're looking at this, we've got that group of 5 We've got another group of 6, and then we've got Tabino and Castro are closing that gap down. So they're going to be at Gardini here in the next 2 or 3 laps. I think they're just doing a great job of just running really well together. Maybe some teamwork, making the dream work, and so now it's just going to be a matter of how far can they get before they have to come in and take their pit stop.
There's still a lot left to be decided in this race. We just finally broke over the halfway mark. This race, it's been absolutely intense ever since the green flag dropped 21 minutes ago. I am shocked that we just barely have barely crossed over that halfway mark. And look at Joao Tabino himself and Duda Castro are still nose to tail. They started this race in the pits, and hey, with that drama, maybe this was an intentional call for them, because any sort of penalty they picked up from starting this race at the tail end of the field has more or less vanished as they're going side by side down the back straightaway. A little bit of leapfrogging between the two of them, with Castro now leading and Tabino picking up the draft. Maybe we could be seeing something that we saw with the old tandem drafting days with NASCAR back in the early 2010s with a car tomorrow, where these drivers had to shuffle around, not because they were getting tired or anything like that, they just didn't want to overcook their motors. So that could be the reason why Castro and Tabino just swap positions. I'm trying to figure out how this would work when it comes to the championship fight. Tabino would need a fairly good run. I mean, 30 points is still a pretty big margin over Marco Pinero, who's still leading it over Rodriguez and Monty in P2 and P3 respectively. But maybe Tabino, I feel like he should just take it easy at this point, because with the drama that we've seen so far and the drama that's going to ensue in the next 18 minutes until we take that checkered flag, him running in P13, for all we know, by the time this race is all said and done, he could very well end up in the top 5. We just never know.
That's true. You just don't know, because there's going to be a few more incidents, I think, before this race is over. They're still running hard at the front. So, yeah, I mean, Tabino doesn't have to win the race. He doesn't have to beat Pinero. He's just got to be close. He had a nice 30-point lead. So, you know, if he's within 3 or 4 spots of Pinero at the end of the race, he'll get the championship. And so that's really what you're looking out for is, you know, you can go win the race, but, you know, the championship's there for the taking. You just have to be clean for the last 18 minutes of the race or so.
Cleanliness, if I can pull off correct grammar, cleanliness is going to be huge in this race. If you keep it clean, you're going to be running in a fantastic result. Jörg Mani is a very clean racer, and he's had an up and down year running in P1 as things stand in both the Masters category and overall. And it goes back to the point we mentioned during qualifying, Charles. Of all the races that we've had this season, this is definitely the one where we could see a driver other than S1 driver take the win overall. Jörg Mani has a pretty good opportunity to do that if he can hold off any sort of challenges and keep it out of the barriers. Again, up and down season he's had so far. Not going to mention the word that starts with L and ends with a K. And we'll just see what Jörg Mani can do between now and the end of it.
Yeah, in Jörg's, you know, if I think he'll be the first to tell you that he's very safe on pit stops. Usually takes more fuel than he needs because he doesn't like running out. And so that's going to be can he take enough to get to the end and not lose that lead draft? That's going to be the key for him to try and get this win. But you know, they're still, you know, like I said, we just hit the 24-minute mark, and so you know everybody, pretty much the top 10, 12, 13 cars have still got to come into the pits. So you know, still lots of positions to be shook up. And if somebody goes on a flyer, they may be able to get a lead that's insurmountable. We've seen it before where you think, oh, this group will draft up to the back of them, but it doesn't happen because they end up fighting amongst themselves. So we'll see what happens when all this is over, as we see Overstreet making the move around Bobby West.
You see a little bit of front end damage on the front of Megan Overstreet's race car. Hopefully that doesn't slow her down too much. This race has been absurd, and it's continuing to be absurd as we've got a 3-wide fight between Reese, Gradwell, and Stevie Ray heading into the inner loop. They single file out before they head into the corner. Antonio Reese has not been ideal for him thus far, running down in P20. We'll see if he can make up some positions between now and the end of this. We still have a decent amount of pit stops for these drivers to contend with, and the leader in the Spec 2 category, that being Badley running in 15th, has now come in as well. You can see him trundling his way down the pit. So Kenneth Badley in the 222 car Yeah, I think he's probably going to relinquish the lead in the Spec 2 category to Russ Teckler, who's going to overtake him right about now. So there you go. The driver of the 260 car takes the lead in Spec 2. And, man, it's shaping up to be very interesting races. York is actually dropping back. He may have picked up a slowdown or possibly has some damage on that race car. He's running down to P7. Now we're going to take a look at a replay to see what happened to York here. He's running in third. Actually, no, he's running in fourth, heading into the corner. So we'll see. Oh, mega sideways. That was a big moment for York. He had to wheel that thing to keep it out of the barrier. York did a fantastic job of saving that car.
Yeah, for sure. Just caught that curb on the inside wrong going into the inner loop, and had to catch it and save it. And now he said, you know what? I got to come in and pit. And so he's going to come in now, as we see Pinero is in. Looks like Favini is in. Gardini is in. And so we've got a shake-up in the front. Rodriguez is taking the lead.
It's been a little while since we've seen Andre Favini and Gardini on track at the exact same time. I think the racing gods are punishing us with that, but nevertheless, we'll see how they exit out when they come out of the pits in the not-too-distant future. Monty and Pinero in as well, so this is going to be, this is probably the most amount of cars we've seen down the pits. You see Pinero, Favini, Monty, Gardini, Brewster, West and Overstreet are overtaking Kern along with Brewster as well, so West and Overstreet with their early pit stops that they made earlier on in this race, they're trying to see if that works, and I think compared to the likes of Favini and Pinero, I think it hasn't worked out terribly for them. However, I think they may have wanted just a little bit more out of this undercut strategy that they implement. I will say they have jumped ahead of York, which I guess is some consolation prize. However, Pinero is still a little bit farther up the road.
Yeah, but they're still working together. You can see them just hooked together. That's going to increase their speed. And so they're going to be able to get, all they got to do is get to the back of Favini. They get to the back of Favini's draft, and they'll get towed up to that group quite quickly, as Cabanca is now into the pits. Pritchard as well.
Ooh, this is that exodus of drivers from the racetrack and into the pits. Tabino and Castro along with them as well. Tabino and Castro, regardless of where they finish this race, you have to commend their fantastic recovery drive. Started this race down pit lane, and they're going to end it maybe in the top 10. We'll just have to wait and see. There's some hard battling here with Russell involved, and that was Brunson Roscoe mega sideways heading through the inner loop. Thankfully for him, he kept it on the road. Man, that was a huge moment for him. Thankfully, he kept it going in a straight line and is still running in P number 22 as things stand currently, which I believe would be third. Yeah, third currently in that Spec 2 category. Marco Pinero is making his way up the running order with drivers coming down pit lane. He has made his way up into P6 and is going to be side by side with Cabanca. Those two very close, and Jason Green off the track. So one of the drivers that we had eyeballed as maybe going for a different strategy. He's always been very good with fuel saving in these Spec Racer Ford race cars. He has gone off the track running in P4 and may lose a spot to Chris Murakami here in the not too distant future. May have been a simple mistake. We may be able to find a replay to see exactly what happened to Jason Green that caused him to go off the road. That's a pretty big mistake for a driver who could have really pulled off a late pit stop strategy. If anyone was going to do it, it was probably going to be Jason Green, as Rodriguez and Kramer in P1 and P2 have come in as well, along with Green and Murakami. So this is giving the lead to Simon Mayer, who, outside of Jason Green, Simon Mayer, he has used these late pit stop strategies to full effect. He won at Canadian Tire about a month and a half ago at this point. He used that strategy to absolute perfection, and he may try and do the same here as well. Running in the lead in that number 5 car, we could see him try and go for some off-the-wall wacky strategy. We'll just have to wait and see what he does.
Yeah, we'll have to keep an eye on that because, and you're right, he did that late. He did a good job of fuel saving and was the last car to come into the pits, and it worked out for him to his advantage. And I thought I saw Green making a move on Rodriguez for the lead before we saw Green coming slowly out of the bus stop. So I'm going to guess that there was a little bit of dramatics going into the bus stop that was the reason he lost that time.
And it's just small little mistakes in a race like this can cost you big time. I mean, these lap drivers are only setting 1 minute 20 lap time, so just 1 second loss can make a huge difference when it comes to these drivers and their strategy calls. Simon Mayer negotiating his way around the second to last corner. We'll see if he comes in this time by. He's not literally driving very fast. I wonder if he is actually sputtering on fumes there. He's finally come into the pits. So Simon Mayer pits from the lead of the race, has about a 29.5 second gap between himself and Cabanca. So we'll see how that diminishes between now and when he comes out of the pits in the not too distant future. If Mayer does lose the lead, and I believe he will, Cabanca would be the one inheriting the lead of the race, and Pinero would be right behind him in P number 2. Favini has actually dropped back along with Rodriguez, Monti, and Overstreet a little bit farther behind. So this really turned into a 2-horse race between Cabanca and Pinero. This is still going to be very, very tense between these two. Cabanca, he put on a fantastic show in the Formula 4s earlier on today. As you can see now, Mayer exiting the pits. He's going to be, I think, a little bit off touch with the other pack right behind our 1-2 runners. Actually, no, he's going to be in the midst of this. So very good strategy call must be set for Simon Mayer, but now he's going to be stuck in a hornet's nest of Spec Racer Ford race cars. Let's see if he holds on.
Yeah, he's on the outside. He's just going to have to bide his time. You have to give up a couple of spots, but he's just going to be at the back of this group, and there's nothing wrong with that, because as we've seen, you can be the first car or the last car, and you get one good run with the draft, and you could go from the back to the front very, very quickly. As we see Favini looking around, Rodriguez going wide, coming out of the bus stop there, sends Monti wide through the carousel, Overstreet on the inside. So these cars need to get lined up. They've got to get a chore in front of them. They got to get back up to that front group. It's got about a 2-second gap, but if these cars work together, as opposed to fighting each other through each corner, they can actually make that time up. These 5 or 6 cars that are running together can actually run faster than the 2 that are in front.
Yeah, well, if I'm being honest, Charles, I don't foresee any of these drivers trying to work together as pseudo teammates. They're going to be giving it hell. We only have 8 minutes left to go from the final race of the season. They're going to be pushing it to the absolute limit. I'm sure it's only a matter of when, not if, that we see Favini and Rodriguez start to battle hard for that final podium position. It's currently about a 1.9 second gap between the front 2 runners of Pinero and Cabanca to the pack led by Favini a little bit farther behind. And we may see Cabanca possibly eye up a move heading into the inner loop this time by. He pulls out. We could be seeing some mind games played between these two as Cabanca and Pinero finally swap spots. Maybe we could be seeing what we mentioned earlier with drivers not trying to overcook their motors and getting a little bit of cold air into those radiators as Monti, Rodriguez, Overstreet, and Favini are battling very hard. Favini started that flat out blast out of turn number 1. He started that in P3. He's going to end it in P6. It shows you the big game of leapfrog that we have in these Spec Racer Ford Weekend Warriors races. He may lose another one as well, with Mayer closing in and going side by side on corner exit. Very close, and they're making contact. That is a big off for Simon Mayer. He slaps the wall. He's going to be stopped and pretty much out of it. Simon Mayer, the blown motor as well, looked like a big puff of smoke. It was a matter of when, not if, when it came to drivers coming to blows out of turn number 5, just based off the different lines people take out of that corner. However, I think that incident was still fairly, that was avoidable.
Yeah, it was, and you can carry so much more, and I think Favini, and I'm not going to say that it's Favini's fault. I think it's just a racing deal. You can go way out past the red and white curving there without getting an off track. That's just open track out there. You see lots of car categories go out there and just run that line. I think Favini started to and maybe didn't go out quite as far as Mayer expected. And then the contact was made, and that was pretty much race done for Simon Mayer. Unfortunately, he was having a great run, had a good pit strategy, and so now that's one less car that's in this group that's battling for P3.
I think if I was Simon Mayer, after the way his chances of finishing in the top 5 just blatantly disappeared in front of him, I would be quite upset after that incident. I'll just leave it at that. Looking at Jörg Mani, who's running top of the Masters in P number 3. He has a decent gap between himself and Jeff Fischer, the second driver in that Masters category, running all the way down in 12th. So Jörg Mani, he has a fantastic shot of ending this race on the podium, as does Megan Overstreet right behind him in P number 4. Megan, she's put together a fantastic drive. It's been wonderful to see her back out on track after taking most of the beginning part of this season off. She had some work commitments that prevented her from being out on the racetrack with us. It's been fantastic to see her here from the Weekend Warriors Series on both the Formula Ford side of things and the Spec Racer Ford as well. And what a return it would be in the final race of the season to see Megan Overstreet end up on the podium. We'll just have to wait and see if she can get the job done in the final 5 minutes of this race. It's still Panera and Cabanca leading at Panera. I think he was running on the grass and is going to be relinquishing that lead again to Christian Cabanca. This is that game of leapfrog. These drivers, it's you could probably compare it more to a game of chicken as Megan Overstreet gets a move done to move into P3 as Jörg Mani starts to drop back, not having the slipstream help going onto that flat-out blast. But we're starting to see the mind games possibly develop between all these drivers. I'm not really sure. I think leading, coming to the white flag, is going to be a terrible idea and a terrible position to be in if you're any of these drivers. If you're Cabanca or if you're Panero, you definitely want to start that last lap of the race in second. What do you think?
We definitely want to start that last lap of the race in second. As a matter of fact, you probably want to be in second coming to the bus stop. You want to make that move late, and even then you're going to have to do some defending going down that NASCAR short chute in order to hold off for the victory. And I saw Samuli pop down. I was watching the gap. Favini back to Tabino and Castro is now 1.2, so they're just at the edge of draft range. So now they're going to be up there battling for 7th, you know, they've still got a couple more laps left in order to make all this work. So if they start getting crazy up front, this may be just a blitz from the back to the front for those two cars.
If Cabanca and Panera wreck each other out, the fight for the lead is going to be ridiculous, as Andrew Love has come in for a very late pit stop. He was running outside the top 20, and oh my god, we've got 3 wide action going down the back straightaway. It's going to be Megan Overstreet on the inside, possibly backing out of it, and I wouldn't really blame her. Rodriguez is going to be slotting into that P3 spot with these drivers negotiating that inner loop for one of the last times. We only have 3 minutes left on the clock. And I will point out as well, with that hard battling, you can see the likes of Favini, Castro, and Tabino slowly but surely closing in as well. That small little pack between Rodriguez and Mani, only 4 cars, is definitely going to increase in size between now and the end of this. They've been battling hard and trading blows. Hey, I kind of said that, hey, they weren't going to try and work together to try and close up Cabanca and Panero's. Tom Gradwell has gone off, heading through the inner loop. That's not ideal for the driver involved in the Masters Championship fight. He's going to drop down the running order. But I kind of had a sneaking suspicion that Rodriguez, Overstreet, West, and Mani weren't going to work together to close the gap up between Cabanca and Panero along with themselves. Hey, we're seeing that put on full display there. Slowly losing touch with these two. These two are covered by 0.3 of a second coming out of turn at number 1 on what we believe will probably be the third to last time. Cabanca, Panero, some of the best drivers this series has to offer, and they're probably going to put on one of the best battles we've seen all season long here.
Oh yeah, it'll be very close to finish unless something strange happens. So I know Panero looks like he's just waiting in line. I think that's the smart move. He said, you know what, I'm sitting in second. I think that's where I want to be for right now. As we see this group, as we see Tabino and Castro getting by Favini, Dragon Green and Gardini and Fritcher along for the ride. They got a little bit of help. There was a lap car, I think it was Carvalho, that was between them, is actually kind of extending that draft up to that second group. So yeah, it's getting crunch time here. I think we're gonna be a white flag this time.
I think you might be right, Charles. 1 lap to go from this season, 1 lap to go from this race, and it's going to be Christian Cabanca coming into the pits. What in the world? Christian Cabanca has come down pit lane with only 1 lap to go. Was he too short on fuel? That would be a heartbreak for the driver of the 78 car. Could this possibly be a penalty? We'll see if he stops in the box or if he just runs fully down pit lane. This would be heartbreak nevertheless. I think he's slowly meandering down towards the pit box. Yeah, Christian Cabanca coming in for a late splash and dash. Heartbreak for Christian Cabanca. Right as I was going to say, I was going to be a fight between Panero and Cabanca. Cabanca pulls into the pits. Heartbreak, absolute heartbreak. We saw last week it was a double for Jan Lin. He won in the Formula Fords, he won in the Spec Racer Fords, and oh my god, we've got 3 wide action with Megan Overstreet dipping 2 wheels into the grass, heading into the inner loop for the final time. The front end of her race car looks absolutely battered and destroyed, ready for the junkyard is that race car, but she is still wheeling it like an absolute treat, and we see her going side by side with Jorg Monty. That's for P4 and P5. Rodriguez is hold off in P number 2, and even though that gap between himself and Panero has actually increased decreased to 1.4 seconds, I don't think it is going to be enough. They're taking the checkered flag this time by, and Marco Panero, who's been one of the drivers running up towards the north end of the field all throughout this season, he has put on a wonderful drive as well. It wasn't easy for sure, but Marco Panero, the driver of the number 16 car from Italy, is going to take the final checkered flag from the Spec Racer Ford Weekend Warriors season number 2 from 2024. He wins at Watkins Glen. That's very close right behind Rodriguez. Ends up in second with Bobby West running at the podium in third. Jason Green ends up in ninth. A nice recovery after that spin a little bit earlier on. Philip Berry, who haven't really touched on the S2 fight, Philip Berry is rounding his way around the final corner, and he's going to take the final checkered flag in the Spec 2 category down in P18 overall. He wins in Spec 2. And Jorg Monty, we didn't really talk about him too much. Disappointing from his perspective. I'm sure that he didn't grab a podium. However, he is going to grab the final Masters win of the season. That I'm really only focused on Cabanca coming in for a very late splash and dash. That is a terrible miscalculation from Christian Cabanca. That is going to sting.
Yeah, that he's going to be kicking himself for that. His pit stop time was about 1.2 seconds shorter than most everybody else. Definitely for Panero, and it's just didn't have enough. He didn't feel like he was going to be able to make it around, so he had to pit and just kind of suck it up and just drops him down the order. But a great finish. I think Fritcher gets P2 in Masters, and I think that's enough for him to win the Masters Championship over P2. So we'd have to go back and look. I can't give you that officially because I don't know, but I think that's going to be Fritcher with the Masters win. So
Well, I'll definitely be able to report on that in 1 week's time when we head to Daytona for the runoffs under the lights. That's going to be intense in 1 week's time. And looking at the race results from the final Spec Racer Ford Weekend Warriors race of the season, Marco Panero is the one taking the checkered flag. Only a second and a half between himself and Jesus Rodriguez by the end of it. I'm curious, maybe if this race was an hour long, we could have seen some harder battling up towards the front of the field. Jesus Rodriguez, though, very happy to end up this race in P number 2. I believe he was a pretty hard charger as well, up 3 spots from where he started this race. Nicely played from the Spanish driver. And then P3, running at the podium, is one of the first drivers to come down pit road, that being Bobby West. He runs at your podium, and right behind is Megan Overstreet, who made up 10 spots and was one of those early pitters as well. Jorg Monty is going to be the top of the Masters in P5. Joao Tabino in 6th, Duda Castro in 7th. The two of them start this race from the pits. They end up just knocking on the door of the top 5. Still very impressive drive from those two Brazilians. Andre Vivini is going to end up this race in 8th. Jason Green in 9th. Claudio Gradini will round out your top 10. That's Jeff Frischer in 11th. Trent Kramer in 12th. Chris Murakami in 13th. Stevie Ray Series admin in P14. And Antonio Reese, with a dramatic day, is going to end up in 15th.
Yeah, Christian Cabanca, after that late stop, finishes in 16th. Brad Cathcart in 17th. Philip Berry gets Spec 2 win. It finishes 18th overall. Tom Gradwell in 19th. Kenneth Batley P2 in Spec 2 in 20th. And Paulo Brim gets the final spot on the Spec 2 podium in 21st. Russ Telker in 22nd. Jim Brewster 23rd. Bob Kern 24th. Wilson Brzarosco in 25th. Johnny Longan in 26th. Andrew Love in 27th. Michelle Viglini in 28th. John Vogel 29th. Scott Russell in P30. Pedro Carvalho, 31st. Simon Mayer in 32nd. Great run till the crash. Josh Wilkie, our buddy, 33rd. Kurt Nunez in 34th. And Wayne Buttermore is in 35th. And that's the final car on the grid.
So those are the results from the final Spec Racer Ford Weekend Warriors race of the season at Watkins Glen, and we've got some drivers waiting in the interview waiting area. I think I'll have a quick little chat with Bobby West, who had a very dramatic drive all the way up to P number 3. Bobby, congratulations on the podium. It was a hard-fought day from you behind the wheel. Talk us through this race here at Watkins Glen.
Hey, yeah, thanks. First podium of the season. I've finished like 4th and 5th, I think, in every other race I've done this season. So, try to do something different. I saw Megan go in very early, so I thought we were going so slow in a group, and there's such a high chance of everyone just crashing at any point, especially up to the bus stop. Just get out of it, and came out with Megan, and we were doing all right actually. The two of us going together. We were closing on the leader each lap. We had a couple of laps where we encountered some back markers, and I think that was the difference between us battling with Jürgen, Jesus, and Marco out front. So there you go.
And you brought up a very good point talking about that early decision to come down pit road, the chances of running into a competitor and running into some sort of trouble up towards the north end of the field. Was that one of the contributing factors and probably one of the main reasons he came down pit road, or was just the idea of doing something different compared to everyone else kind of tempting as well?
Yeah, it definitely was a factor. I was erring about it, and then Chris Mokami had a little bit of contact at the bus stop, and I was like, oh no, that's it now. I'm out of here. I'm getting out of this. So I thought it's just going to escalate, although it didn't in the end of it. So it seems that everyone survived after that. But yeah, and also Maurizio Naselli did this at Road America, and it came to mind thinking like pit early and go quicker on your own sort of thing. Our lap times were off what I could do on my own in practice, so it was like, I'm sure we can make it work, and it worked out in the end.
Yeah, it did work out very well for you. Congratulations on the P3 in this race, and the slipstream was huge here at Watkins Glen, and Daytona in 1 week's time for the runoffs is going to be big as well. So are you going to be there for the runoffs in 1 week's time, and what do you think that race is going to be like?
Yeah, my intention to be there. I usually take part, so and yeah, don't lead into the bus stop. That would be the thing.
I think that's going to be the order of the day in both the Spec Racer Fords and the Formula Fords. But Bobby, thank you for joining us here in the commentary booth. Is there anyone you want to give a thanks to or shout out?
Just say hi to my partner and my family, my parents who watch as well. So they watch us each week.
Amen, Bobby. Thank you for joining us here in the commentary booth. Congratulations on the podium. Hope to see you next time out on track at the runoffs in a week's time. That was Bobby West, who rounds out your podium, and the person he worked with all throughout that race was Megan Overstreet. Charles, would you like to have a chat with her?
Absolutely. Let's talk with Megan. So Megan Overstreet, P4 overall, not quite the podium, but so Bobby just said that he basically just saw you going into the pits early and said, you know what, that seems like a good idea. So I'm just going to follow her, and it almost worked out for you.
Yeah, it was probably the right strategy for us to do that, because we were running like 1 minute 23, 24 second laps in the lead pack draft, and things were just getting crazy. So I was like, you know what, as soon as I can get into the pits, I'm going to pit. Hopefully I get some cleared track, because I know I could do 121s and 122s solo, and luckily Bobby pitted as well, so we were able to leapfrog each other to go a little bit quicker. But our strategy got messed up just a little bit because we ran into traffic a few times in a few inopportune areas that lost us a lot of time. So we didn't quite make it to that lead group at the very end.
No, but you were really close though, and I think you're right. I think it was a really good, smart strategy call to come in, and just I didn't know if you had planned it or not, but you guys worked together really well and did exactly what we call the tandem racing, and just and made that strategy work and ended up back up in the top 5.
Mm-hmm.
All right, well, Megan, I'm gonna let you give your thanks and shout outs.
Yeah, thank y'all for doing the broadcast. Y'all do a fantastic job. Stevie Ray for putting on the series. He had a good finish today. Everybody out there that's watching, our sponsors, and my family, thank y'all so much.
I expect we'll see you next week unless work says otherwise.
I hope so. I'm putting in for Friday with the weekend off, so fingers crossed.
There we go. All right. Thank you, Megan. Congratulations.
Thank you.
I'm keeping my fingers crossed as well that we see Megan Overstreet out on track. She always makes it interesting, whatever race she is a part of. And she mentioned Stevie, and Stevie, even after having a chat with us after the Formula Ford Weekend Warriors broadcast a little bit earlier on this afternoon, has volunteered to come back here into the broadcast booth, aka the Apex Racing TV mental institution. Stevie, back again for round 2, and this time we actually have a race to talk about because we saw you battling hard all throughout that. So talk us through the madness here at Watkins Glen.
Oh yeah, it's fun. I mean, Watkins Glen just causes a lot of that madness just by the nature of the beast. And before the pits, I had planned lap 10, and I saw some guys go in at 9. I thought, that's going to be a little early, guys. And then when I came in at 10 and came back out, Tom was right there once again, and we hooked up. And then I was a little surprised when Antonio came out, and he was right there. And I thought, okay, I'm in good company now. And see how the rest of the race, we had a great battle. And I don't know what happened with Tom. If I got into him, going into the bus stop there, we'll have to go back and see, but apologies to Tom for anything there. And then Antonio and I finished it out. And I had a string of bad luck at the beginning of the season and kind of backed out a little bit, and to come back and actually get to start and finish the race was a good feeling to close out the season.
I think we've noticed that with a lot of the drivers in the Masters category. Yourself, Antonio Reese, and Uragmani were struck by falling anvils a lot throughout this season. But here at Watkins Glen, this was probably I think we'll use the word different to describe how this race was compared to all the other ones that we've seen so far this season. Would you say this was probably the most hectic to be a part of, or is there another one that's up towards the top of your list?
It was my most hectic for sure, and hard racing. Said I couldn't tell what was going on up front. I'm anxious to watch the broadcast that you guys do, but yeah, it was definitely a battle the whole race.
We were at a loss for words, not even past the halfway mark. So if that's a good sign of how exciting the racing was, there you go. So Stevie, we talked about this at the end of the Formula Ford Weekend Warriors broadcast as one. We'll bring it up here. We've got the runoffs coming up at Daytona under the lights in 1 week's time. Talk us through with the viewers about how that's going to be and where we can watch it.
Yeah, that's going to be the nighttime's the right time at nighttime at Daytona Road Course for the Formula Fords, and then the Spec Racer Fords. 30 minutes for the Formula Fords, 40 minutes for these. And you don't have to be a league member to join in for that one. Just sign up. The registration's on the Facebook page, the Discord, the website. So if you need to know, send me an email or a PM, and we'll get you there. And it's going to be, you guys are going to broadcast it, Apex Racing TV. Mm-hmm. So looking forward to putting on a good show for you.
We're looking forward to the show that you drivers are going to put on, because that is going to be intense, particularly here in the Spec Racer Fords, where it's going to be a 120-mile-an-hour game of leapfrog, especially coming to the checkered flag. But Stevie, again, thank you for all the hard work that you do in this series. Myself, Charles, and our producer Samuli really appreciate all the hard work and the good stuff that you put on week in and week out. And yeah, we'll let you go and enjoy the rest of your afternoon. We'll definitely have a chat with you at the runoffs for the Ray Esports Racing League coming up this Tuesday, as well as the runoffs here for the Weekend Warrior Series coming up in a week's time. And I think before we let you go, would you like to talk a little bit about the support that Personal Wealth Solutions has kind of given you all throughout the season to make this series possible?
Yeah, he came on board the second half of this season to support us, and also the Spec Racer Ford in class in the Ray Esports unofficial SCCA league. So gotta thank him for coming on board and supporting us. It's a really good thing that popped up, and looking forward to trying to set something up with him for next season. So appreciate you guys for all you do. Great broadcast. And like I always say, and I truly mean it, this league's nothing without these guys on track every week. They're the ones that really make the league what it is. So appreciate all the weekend warriors.
Well, Stevie, thank you again for joining us in the commentary booth. We'll let you go. Hopefully have a chat with you this upcoming Tuesday when we wrap things up from the Ray Esports Racing League. Thanks for joining us, man.
All right, guys, have a good night.
All right.
That was Stevie Ray, the series admin, put on a pretty good show and ended up P4 in the Masters category today, so nicely played for him. But Charles, it's been a pleasure joining you here with the Spec Racer Ford Weekend Warriors, and what a way to end this season off with the absolute madhouse and the chaotic race that we just had at Watkins Glen. Final thoughts on this race and the whole season?
It lived up to everything that you would expect for Watkins Glen with the Spec Racers. It's just the nature of the beast, and then that beast gets amped up for next week. Next week's going to be, this on steroids. It's going to be huge packs at Daytona, night racing, so nice cool track to work with, and these cars are just going to be they're going to be running hard, and we're going to see who starts who's in third coming into the bus stop. And that's probably who's going to end up winning the race, but it'll be close, I'm sure, at the end. So it's looking forward to it to close out another season of Weekend Warriors. Couldn't ask for a better track.
It's going to be craziness, absolute craziness with the runoffs in 1 week's time. That'll be on Sunday, June the 9th here on Apex Racing TV, only here on Apex Racing TV at 2:45 Eastern Time. I'm not sure how that works out with the other time zones, but hey, you can do the conversion. Google is a free service, so just look it up on Google what 2:45 Eastern Time is for whatever time zone you're in. You better stay tuned, because it is going to be absolutely intense there in 1 week's time. And you better stay tuned here on Apex Racing TV, because we've got action all around the clock every single day. In fact, coming up later on this evening at about 8 p.m. Eastern, we are going to be broadcasting the Radical Sim Racing Americas Championship, round 6 of that season from Road America. Charles and I are going to be on the call with that. We've also got the Rickmatech Sports Car Series, round 3 of that season at Mid-Ohio this upcoming Monday at the same time, 8 p.m. Eastern. And of course, the runoffs coming up in 1 week's time for both the Weekend Warriors Series and this upcoming Tuesday for the Ray Esports Racing League. It gives you many reasons to hit that subscribe button and the notification bell on YouTube, so you never miss a single thing from this series and this channel. But I think for the last time here from the Spec Racer Ford Weekend Warriors Season 2 of 2024, that will do it. So for myself, Ron Mons, Charles Bichelle joining me in the commentary booth, Samuli Kuma doing a great job working the cameras and the virtual production hauler, the drivers on track, Stevie Ray behind the scenes to make it all possible, and Personal Wealth Solutions for their generous financial support of the series. I say thank you all so much for watching. Have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you all again for the runoffs in 1 week's time.